I am a professor here at York College. Been here for 25, I think maybe this is actually my 26th year. I have a master's in organic synthesis from Miami University in Ohio, and then I have a PhD in analytical chemistry. And for the last almost 15 years, I've been working on climate science literacy. And one of the things that came out of that is we have an ongoing project where I have students every year through the American Chemical Society, which is ACS is the acronym for that, through the American Chemical Society, where we take a group of 10 students to the International Climate Summit. It's called the COP, or Conference of Parties.
Okay.
And it's the negotiations, and it's a 2-week negotiating period. And so we have 5 students the first week and 5 students the second week, and they're from all over the country. They are, every year we have had a representative from York College.
Okay.
This past year, that was a student named Spencer Smith. He's a senior civil engineering major. So, you know, if you need any info on that, you could follow up with him. He'd be, I'm sure, very happy to talk to you.
Okay, and the name is Spencer Smith?
Yep.
Okay. Question number 2. How big of a threat is climate change in today's society?
So, climate change, the threat is as big as it gets. It is, in my estimation, it is the most significant scientific issue of our generation, of your generation, and of generations to come.
Okay.
And so it is a threat to life as we know it on this planet if we do not address the issues in a fairly short time frame.
Question number 3. According to the World Health Organization, 25% of children 5 and under die each year due to hazards caused by air pollution and waterborne disease. What do you believe this means within the fight to reduce the effects of climate change?
Yeah, so the waterborne disease is one that I think it kind of exemplifies the issue. And the issue is that so climate change is a very complex issue. It includes a number of factors, both chemistry, atmospheric chemistry. It has, all of the things that we experience as climate is quite varied in all the areas that of study, and so it's complicated. But if you try to boil it down to some relatively simpler issues, if you think through this process of a warming planet, and you think through the process of when it warms up in our region, what does that mean, right? And so that means different things to different species, and different things to different plants, animals, all of that. But one of the things that you can look more closely at are these diseases that we didn't used to have to be concerned about. And so that's the same thing with waterborne disease, and the same thing with what we would call disease vectors. So, for instance, one of the prime examples is in our area is Lyme disease, right? Lyme disease maybe 20 years ago was something that was just emerging, and it was not very widespread. As the climate has changed, the climate for essentially growing ticks that lead to Lyme disease, that climate spreads, and it spreads towards the north, right? And so now it's pretty prevalent throughout Pennsylvania, and it's beginning to be prevalent in Canada, and so it's kind of, creeping northward.
Yeah.
That's a similar effect that the WHO is talking about in terms of waterborne diseases. In climates where the temperature of the water does not get to a level that would sustain many of these waterborne diseases, as those temperatures rise, that means that you have more of these waterborne diseases, right?
Yeah.
Now, we know how to treat a lot of these diseases. We know how to treat Lyme disease. We know how to treat a lot of the waterborne diseases. But the problem comes in it's kind of twofold. One is that in countries that don't have the resources that the richer countries have, in those countries, the ability to treat the disease is minimized, and that leads to more sickness and more mortality. And then you have areas where the disease has not been a problem, and the doctors and medical professionals do not have any background in it. And so now all of a sudden that disease is prevalent in the area. That means that the doctors might not pick up on it as quickly. It could lead to, again, more severe sickness, mortality, that kind of stuff. So it's kind of a double-edged sword in terms of how these diseases creep into new areas.
Yeah. Question number 4. Many people have said that blimps could be effective at reducing air pollution by roughly 90%. What are your thoughts on this?
Blimps. As a mode of travel, is that what you mean?
As both a mode of travel or like carrying cargo or like important supplies from the different countries.
So that's something that I haven't heard much about. I guess I could, if you think through what are the downsides, some of the downsides are time, right? I mean, blimps aren't traveling at anywhere near the speed of jet aircrafts, and so I think that would be a number one relatively big issue.
Yeah.
You would probably, it would be more comparable to shipping, right? So I think that as we look at the issue of climate change, I don't think there are bad answers, right? If you can reduce our output of CO2 without harming other parts of the environment, then it's a reasonable thing to consider. And so if it's going to reduce our CO2 emissions and, like I said, not harm other parts of the environment, and we can do it safely, sounds like a great plan. I think there's some some other issues, potentially economic and other, that might be a little bit of a problem. But I say we put everything on the table, as long as it meets those conditions of reducing CO2 and being deployed safely and without harming any other part of the environment.
Okay. How much of a role do you think the government should play in the fight to reduce climate change?
That is a great question, because I think that is what creates the political divide in this discussion. Having said that, governments are crucial to implementing policies that will encourage industries, individuals, the government itself to reduce CO2 emissions. And so I think it plays a big role. But then you look at economic impacts, and one of the things that we've seen in the last decade is our CO2 emissions in the United States have gone down, not significantly enough, but they have been reduced, and that's because of the onset of natural gas.
Mm-hmm.
That was an economic driver, right? The government did not have a lot to do with that, and that becomes a problem in that the political argument, then people jump on that and say, well, you're getting rid of coal, and the answer to that is no. Coal is no longer economically feasible, and that's why it's going away. It's got very little to do with government policies.
Mm-hmm.
So the government policies can enhance the change, but there have to be these economic drivers along with that. And there was a Nobel Peace Prize in economics was handed out a few years back to an economist that said, if you're not considering climate change in your long-range forecast for your company, then your company is not going to make it.
Mm-hmm.
So there are plenty of other forces, but the government has to be involved at a reasonable level to make sure that these things do happen.
Okay. Question number 5. People say that climate change isn't going to have serious effects on people until 7 years from now. If we do not address climate change in 7 years, what could be some of the effects that could affect our climate?
Well, people that are saying that are misinformed. We are already in the midst of climate change effects. There are some things that we can point to that everyone, at least in our country, everyone has knowledge of and or firsthand experience. If you look at the fire season in the western U.S., it is no longer contained to I think it used to be a 6-month season. It is now a year-round season. That is due to increasing temperatures, and that's due to climate change. The intensity of storms has increased dramatically in the last 10 years. It's not necessarily the number of storms as much as this intensity factor, and so you don't have to look very far even on the East Coast. I mean, you probably what was that, Superstorm Sandy? You probably remember that. There are a lot of people on the East Coast that remember that. That was enhanced by climate change. It wasn't caused by climate change, but because the ocean was warmer, that storm became so much stronger, and it caught people by surprise as to how strong it was. So all of these effects are taking place. if we don't address it in a more significant way in the next 7 years, we're just going to see more and more effects. We're going to see warmer winters. This winter was unusually warm, right? I mean, December was one of the hottest Decembers on record. All of that is adding up to, this is exactly what the science is predicting. The science is predicting that climate change will have impacts that are quite varied. There will be an increase in temperature, right, around the globe throughout all seasons. We're experiencing that. There will be an increased intensity in storms. We're experiencing that. There are all these other things that happen due to this increasing temperature, like the fires in the West, because of shifting patterns in the climate, drier, hotter, more fuel for fires. All of those things are taking place. So that's just going to get worse.
All right. Question number 6. Is there anything we as average citizens can do to prevent climate change? If so, what measures can we take?
So absolutely, there are things that we can do. We're experiencing it, so we're not going to prevent it. What we can do is we can begin to make some relatively minor changes in the way that we go about our lives that can help us reduce the impacts. So now it's all about reducing the impacts. And one of the numbers that you'll see a lot of is 2050, right? If we don't change things dramatically by 2050, that is one of the significant tipping points. So what can we do? We can right now, as an individual, you can, in most states, sign up for renewable sources for your electricity. In any state, as far as I know, you can get solar panels for your home. That doesn't necessarily mean that everybody's going to be able to do that, right? I mean, that's a financial thing. But you can, and pretty much everybody can, drive less, carpool more, walk more, use a bicycle more, use less fossil fuels, turn down a thermostat in your home, especially when nobody's there, turn out lights, use less water. I know that water isn't necessarily the thing that we talk about a lot in climate change, but all of the environmental measures are significant, right, in terms of how things move forward, and they're not necessarily directly tied to climate change, but all of these things can have a positive effect on the environment.
Okay. That'll be it for the interview.
Okay.
All right. Thank you so much.
All right.